And everything's interconnected, like when you inject something in the muscle goes to the blood vessel. The blood vessels go to the heart, to the lungs, to the colon, right? And then they end up in your bowels. So everything is interconnected. I'm having this thing right now with, you're familiar with Carnivore MD?
Yep.
So Carnivore MD, right? So he's on the bandwagon about suntan lotion, right? And I have my sister, Carol Hazan, who's the top dermatologist in New York, who's like, May is cancer month, skin cancer month, put your suntan lotion, right? So both of them, he's like, suntan lotion is bullshit. And she's like, oh my God, this guy. And she's like, and the whole time she's like, why is he without a shirt? So it's like, but he's showing who he is, yes. Right? So I'm like, well, Carol, let's do the study. Let's see what does the suntan lotion do on the microbiome, right? So that's my next interest.
That's going to be interesting.
Because, maybe there is something. Maybe it's doing nothing. Maybe it's doing something. But, yes, people should protect themselves. We know melanoma, skin cancer. The problem is we are living in a society now where we've washed all the bacteria that was protecting us. You look at the Amazon jungle. These women do not put suntan lotion on, right? And they don't have skin cancer, right? So there is some microbes that are protecting them from, the elements. Maybe in the future we'll find out that skin cancer.
Because I'm aware of what he talks about.
Yes.
And it's funny, I was just looking at that, and it's cool. I can't wait to meet your sister one day. I think it's going to come down to seed oils.
100%. Yeah. That's going to be the future.
Really
I think when we think about nutrition, we need to think about, what is good for our guts and what is not good for our guts, right? So in other words, am I having a problem digesting? If I'm eating corn and I'm having digestive problems, probably corn is not really compatible with my guts, right? With my gut. If I'm from Spain, Morocco, Greece, Italy, and I'm eating sushi and all of a sudden I'm getting indigestion from the sushi, maybe I'm not supposed to be eating sushi.
I know I had a client once who was eating spinach.
Yeah.
And his wife was all about spinach, but he kept saying the spinach was bothering him.
Yes.
She's like, it's healthy. What are you talking about? Eat spinach.
Yes.
And then later found out that it didn't work with him.
Yes, exactly.
His gut rejected it.
I had a guy that came in with full-on celiac sprue ulcers throughout the small bowel. And I said to him, what did you change in your diet? He goes, well, I started eating 7 breads with oat and gluten and all that. And I'm like,
breads.
And I'm like, 7 grains. And I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you change from not eating bread to all of a sudden, someone said it was good for me. And that's the mistake. That's the problem people always do. They give their opinion of what works for them to others. But others are different. We all have different fingerprints. How can we possibly digest the same foods?
Right.
We can't. And how can we possibly digest the same medications, vitamins, etc.? Some people have G6PD deficiency. They can't tolerate NAC. Some people have, or hydroxychloroquine for that matter. So you've got to look at where the population is from, what their food supply was, and kind of go back to that.
And a lot of the foods that they ate growing up, right?
Yes. So somewhere along the line of, the prehistorical men to the men of today, there's a balance, right? So we need to pick the good stuff from the prehistorical men. Remember, all they did was eat, raw meat. And, and you look at men in Africa that are eating zebra cold, and they touch the blood and they're eating. Now that's gross to us. And I don't think I would be eating that because I'm in a different community, my body has been already using antibiotics. My body has already been exposed to alcohol swabs and, because unfortunately that was the process that we grew up with, right? So to make that transition of, hey, I'm going to go from complete sterilization to going into the dirt and playing with poop may not be the smartest thing because it's a gradual progression. So, so I think, everybody's an individual and people should stop giving ideas or opinions on what works for them for others because it may not, and you may actually do harm. And, we have liability as physicians when we give an opinion I would hate to see a common person, like someone that's a news reporter giving advice to someone, and then something bad happens to that someone, and then the news reporter gets sued, because that's the future. Listen, we're a litigious society.
To me, everything is about customizing.
Yes.
It's meeting people
Yes.
where they are. And this is fascinating. I can't wait to see what happens with the suntan lotion.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of studies. There's a study on the suntan lotion. There's a lot of studies. We're working with, nutritional products, vitamins, the impact of vitamins, the impact of medications. Listen, not all medications are bad. There's actually some, and I'm going to shock people because, and some pharmaceutical companies are going to have some good data coming on the microbiome, because there's some medications that are doing some good stuff out there.
Right.
The question is, how do you balance that good stuff to kind of like say, okay, well, I shouldn't be giving so much. Maybe we should drop it, right? Because there is a need. There is a need. What are antibiotics? Fungus of a potato. It's another microbe, right?
Right.
So there is a need for those microbes to kind of cohabitate and repopulate, refloralize the gut, right? So the whole process that I thought was refloralization instead of microbiome transplant, figure out what is in the foods, what are in the foods. How do you supplement? So you're missing firmicutes. Which foods have firmicutes, right? You're missing Bacteroides. So that's the path I'm heading to. That's the path I'm trying to bring pharma to my path. I'm trying to bring the politicians to my path. I'm trying to bring everyone, the doctors, to my path, because this is the new frontier. And if we stopped, Elon Musk, or we stopped Steve Jobs or Bill Gates even, where would we be right now? We wouldn't have advanced,
Right.
the technology. We wouldn't have advanced the computers as much as, there's a lot of people out there that, seem to believe one-way solution. I don't believe in that. I believe that there's multiple solutions. And I think, if anything, for me, being that hurricane that runs multiple speeds at all time, to show the miracles. I improved, in fact, cured. I think I can say cured. The kid had Tourette syndrome post-COVID. We found COVID in her stools. We worked with her, got rid of the COVID, and improved her neurological. She stopped swearing. She stopped having tics.
Wow.
That's a huge breakthrough, right? So we're working right now with autism. We have one kid. It starts with one kid, right? Because the one kid you learn, right? So you learn this process worked, this didn't work. I need to do more of that. It always starts with one case. When I did my first fecal transplant outside of C. diff, because microbiome transplant is only approved for Clostridium difficile. When I did it with the FDA on a patient with metastatic mesothelioma, what did I learn from that? I learned that, first of all, the woman started craving her grandson. So I used the grandson's poop as a...
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I did is I watched the patient, right? So over the next few days, weeks, months, and she started craving the same foods as the grandchild. She started craving chicken nuggets. Her appetite improved. She wasn't eating before that. Her hemoglobin was dropped. Hemoglobin went up. What did I learn? I learned that basically, she kept progressing well and fighting the chemo at the same time, but she needed more fecal transplant. But she lived 29 months, when normally a patient with metastatic mesothelioma dies at 16 months.
Wow.
But that was an expensive study. That was we had to do fecal transplant. We had to follow the stool samples. We had to keep seeing what's going on, work with the oncologist. You need coordinators for that, because I can't do all that. So, that's the future. But what it did is that case started other doctors thinking. Oncologists like Dr. gastroenterologists like Mimi Wang at MD Anderson started speaking with her oncologist and saying, hey, look at Sabine's work. We need to start doing that. And then they started doing fecal transplant for people with colitis or complications from the chemo, right? So, or the radiation. So radiation-induced colitis was now improved with fecal transplant. So all that is the future. Then there's the study, of course, of melanoma, where they used, Keytruda with adjuvant microbiome transplant, which improved patients with melanoma. So there's so much. If we stop the progression, we stop progress, and we stop technology. And unfortunately, the person who stops that will become the patient. So when you say to me, well, aren't you worrying driving on the driveway? Listen, I believe in God, and I believe in divine intervention, and I trust him. He's brought me to this path, and he's opened this world to me. Who's going to try to do anything to me, right? If they do, then they're going to be the patient, and then guess what? Who are they going to go to?
Right.
What if I'm the answer? I always say it's best to never have enemies, because you may need something from your enemy, and your enemy may save your life. So it's always best to befriend your enemy, because to me, that's the answer. What's crazy about this pandemic, and what's sad, is that this pandemic divided people on a political basis when it should have united people. And that's the hard part that I see.
Wow. So as we talk, any questions that you guys have that's coming to mind that you would love to want to know? Yes.
Yeah, it's sort of COVID and it's microbiome related. So what about cytokine storm and IL-6? How is that related?
So COVID stimulates the cytokine storm. And so if you look at the paper of the lost microbes, there's actually and all those papers are on Progenobiome. You will see there's a beautiful graph that's hypothetical, obviously, it's a hypothesis, but more and more people are starting to come to term with this, where basically if you've got low bifidobacteria, you're not releasing the cytokines. But if you've got high bifidobacteria, you're releasing the cytokines. So you'll hear people that tell you the story of, I was exposed to someone with COVID. I never got COVID, but last night I had like diarrhea, like crazy. You wonder if maybe that's their bifidobacteria at work flushing out the virus or the cytokines and the virus. So in my opinion, that's how it works. That's how it's interconnected. Remember, bacteria is 20 times bigger than a virus. Virus secretes, cytokines. Bacteria secretes toxins. The key is to keep them non-secreting. In other words, they're they're cohabitating together, but they're not really doing their things, right? So that's basically in a nutshell. Thank you. Great question.
There's that bifidobacterium again.
Bifidobacteria. That's it.
So are you saying that probiotics are helping with COVID?
So probiotics, the problem with most probiotics is they're not really tested at the level of, or regulated per se. So if you look at the data, there's a paper on Progenobiome website publications where we looked at patients that were given, I like to call them low quality probiotics, these over-the-counter CVS generic brands of probiotics. And those people had zero bifidobacteria in their guts, as opposed to people that were taking, products from like GMP facilities where they're validated, they're verified, they see that it's a live microbe that we're giving, and they had a lot higher, but they also had the same level as the people that didn't take anything. So probiotics is an interesting thing because, in my opinion, you may not need probiotics, right? Kids, in my opinion, that have no problems, healthy, do not need anything. Because unfortunately, what we learn in medicine is this. If you take something, you're replacing your body from making it, right? So if I take pancreatic enzymes, my pancreas is going to say, I don't need to work. She's going to give me enzymes, right? So what you want to do is you want to make your body work. You want your enzymes to get secreted. Now, of course, if you drank like a bottle of vodka every night and you trashed your pancreas, you're going to need the pancreatic enzymes, right? If you've trashed your microbiome, you're going to need the probiotics, right? Because you've trashed it. There's no rebuilding it, right? So that's and bifidobacteria is very fragile. I mean, it's something that goes up one day and then the next day you're doing something and it's down again and then it goes back up again. And so it's very fragile, and we're going to show that data of what goes up, what goes down. So, people that have high bifidobacteria one day, they get into a fight with their husband, they get stressed at work, they're drinking those 2 glasses of tequila, and then they're eating some like shrimp that was infected with whatever, and eating strawberries with E. coli, and all of a sudden your gut, or they took antibiotics by the dentist, all of a sudden that great bifidobacteria that was fighting against COVID is no longer, and now you have the perfect storm where it's like, bam, 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 I got COVID. And that's exactly, if you ask patients, and I'm sure you've seen patients, they'll say, yeah, I went to the dentist, he gave me antibiotics. 2 weeks later, I got COVID.
I got COVID right after I took antibiotics.
There you go. Case in point.
And when I got COVID, which
Yes.
was a surprise, I knew I was going to get it, as I
Yes.
share with you.
Yes.
I had a pinched nerve, exercise was done. My eating was off, I was stuck, I did nothing.
That's it.
And I was like, I feel like if I'm going to get it, I'm going to get it.
That's it.
And unfortunately, it was mild, but
Right.
I
And
knew it.
probably the best time to get it is now because this virus is actually kind of mild.
Right.
So you know what? Don't be so disciplined with yourself. Go out there, get it. It's not gonna hurt you. And there's so many medications now, on the market for it that are approved that, it's pretty safe. And not to give a plug for Pfizer, but Paxlovid is not so bad. So it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. So it's fine. So there's other drugs out there. Listen, I liked Regeneron. Regeneron was working great for Delta. And then they stopped using it. So it's kind of a shame. But, and that's the other thing, there's multiple strains of the virus that are occurring. Are we still seeing Delta? Are we still seeing Omicron? Is it Omicron plus? That's what we're on the cutting edge. When we were in Omicron, in Ventura, we were seeing Delta still. So, even though because they test the septic, right? They're not testing the individual.
Right.
So so it was kind of interesting time because, as they were removing Regeneron, I was still seeing Delta. And I'm like, wait a minute, why are we removing Regeneron? I still have patients with Delta because I'm seeing the whole strain in my office, in my lab. So that's where the politics need to step away from the medicine and let doctors be doctors. Had doctors had the ability that I have, which is a genetic sequencing lab that sees and follows the evolution of the virus, doctors would have been more, equipped to kind of treat COVID.
Okay.
But that's what we want to give to the doctors, right? We want to have the ability in the future, as we write more data, to make it available to doctors so doctors can start helping their patients. Because, listen, you've seen companies out there selling microbiome testing, and we certainly have seen Ubiome go under because it was not legit. It was not validated. There was no clinical trials on that. There was no data. There was no publications. And in fact, they were testing, comparing stools to who knows who were the people that were deemed healthy. I remember calling the company at the time because I was seeing, Sanjay Gupta talking about Ubiome. And I'm like, well, it's got to be legit. Let me send my stools there. And I got different results. And then I called the rep and I said, look, I want to start using your company. But who are the normals? And then he said, oh, the poop of the owner of the company is the normal. I go, wait, so the normals are the owners of the company. So we're all being measured compared to the owners of the company. And what makes them healthy? Did they have a colonoscopy? Did they have an annual physical for skin cancer? What makes people healthy? Because you could think you're healthy. And then you come to me and I'll say, well, you know what, Robert, I'm sorry to say, but you have XYZ.
Right.
Right? So, the book always looks good on the outside, but then when you start opening and going through it, there's a lot of secrets in there.
Oh, yeah.
So, and a lot of people live in this delusion that they're healthy because they don't like to face the fact that they have a disease, right? Because it's much better to live in delusion. So in fact, it's like, do you prefer a life of delusion where you don't know what you have, or do you want to know what you have, deal with it, fix it to increase your longevity? Those are the two people. But I think, again, that's freedom of choice. That's where you as an individual make that decision. Do you choose to test your microbiome to know what's your future? Or do you choose to just live, in oblivious? It's your choice. But at the same time, if you're testing your microbiome, you don't want to have a delusion of something that you have if it's not validated. I'm very, very strict on myself because yeah, I have to and I don't mind papers that take 8 months to get published because I want as many people to review the data. I show it before I publish anything. I show it to my peers who are super critical. Neil Stolman, who got me into this microbiome business, is the physician in San Francisco who basically told me the future was in the microbiome. And Neil is very critical. He's not bought into anything. Like, you can't buy him, you can't pay him. And that's what I love about him, because he'll tell it like it is. He'll say there's no right or wrong answers in research. It's all right or it's all wrong. We don't know, right? So by the fact that he looks at a paper of mine and says, yeah, I'll put my name on that paper, which he did, by the way. He put his name on the Lost Microbes because he saw a huge purpose of that paper. That paper is amazing, in my opinion, in the sense that it opened the bifidobacteria, right?
Right.
So Neil Stolman, who's a member of the American College of Gastro, so he's been, he's the original physician that started talking about the fecal transplant to the college, doing lectures on it, and really his dynamic personality got me, to get that route, right? Because who the hell would want to play with poop? No one, right? And I remember years and years ago, almost 2 decades, he took me, I was a young fellow, and he took me around and he would be showing me posters. He's like, the future is in the microbiome. And I'm like, please, Neil, I don't want to play with poop. They call me Gucci girl in the GI lab because if there's poop in the colon, I'm out of there. I'm like, poor prep, sorry, do it tomorrow. But guess what? You listen to him, you listen to his lectures, and you go, well, I guess I'm going to start playing with poop because there's something there. There's a power. I've got to look at it. And he got us there, right? I mean, the first person that got us there was Tom Barodi, Dr. Barodi,
right,
who's author on my book. And imagine getting the pioneer of fecal transplant. This man has written hundreds of papers and was the pioneer of fecal transplant.
Now, is he the one that gave you the name Hurricane?
Yes. And I called him Tornado. So imagine this man saying, yeah, let's put a book together and let's call it Let's Talk Shit, right? I mean, so he joined up with me. I joined up with Neil. We all joined up together. And then we created this group called the Biome Squad because we all saw something, right? So doctors don't just step out and open a genetic lab if they don't see something. But to me, until I sell a commercial product, until I write a paper, I need to have all my dots on my I. I need to be 100% sure, and I need actually people to come to me and say, please put this as a commercial. You're right. Otherwise, it's never going to happen.
What's interesting is how I have a lot of physician friends, but being around you, you can see the scientist. You are a scientist.
If something is not 100%, I can have a patent on something because I started the formula, but I will never promote it until it's 100%. And that's part of the reason I like to work with the FDA, frankly. As much as it's gray hair and, hard, they're the people that stop me by saying, you didn't look at this, and that. Dr. Hazan, with my scientist, when I told him I needed an assay for the microbiome, he said to me, and I said, I needed valid, verified, and reproducible. In other words, if I see my stools, my fingerprint of the microbiome, I need it to reproduce in a month, in a year, in 10 years, right? And I remember he did it valid and verified. And then I came to him, I'm like, so are we ready to start doing analysis as a research, of course? And then he said, didn't you want it reproducible? I'm like, yes, of course. He goes, do you think reproducibility just comes from the sky? He goes, you have to keep doing back and forth. And so we were the first guinea pigs, him and I, and a lot of people in our office to test our microbiome and to see if we had, first of all, we noticed that we had different fingerprints of our microbiome. So that was the first thing that kind of told me, wait a minute, we're all different in our microbiome, right? And then I analyzed my family, and then I realized that there's similarities within my family. So even with me and my husband, I'm like, oh my God, I'm starting to look like my husband. And couples that have been married for 30 years, my husband and I, we know, it's like the yin and yang, right? Like I know how to push his button, he knows how to push mine, but at the end we're like pretty much balanced together, and we're very similar. Like we know in our expressions, in our gestures, that's all from living together and commingling that microbiome.
Right.
So, I always say he has to be nice to me because, if he needs my microbiome, and vice versa, I have to be nice to him because I may need his shit, in the future. So always be nice to your spouse because you're compatible to your spouse and you share the same microbes. So if one of you eat that hamburger that had E. coli and starts, going into C. diff down the road, or not E. coli, but like antibiotics, and starts getting C. diff and you need fecal transplant, your best person is your spouse, in my opinion.
And by the way, when people, like with my clients more and more, I 100%, because they ask, how can I get checked? And I just connect them with your team.
Yeah, so they have to understand it's research.
Yes.
They have to understand that basically we're at the beginning. We're not a commercial. We're not an insurance product, nothing. Eventually, yes, maybe, if I see that there's something worth going there. But until then, I think it's all research. And as long as patients are willing to embark on the research with me and understand that, I will help them. I'm always the person. Listen, I started Ventura clinical trials for one patient who had Crohn's disease, who actually ulcerative colitis, and the surgeons told him to resect the colon. And I said, no, I bet you I can find you a clinical trial to help you to avoid the colectomy. And you know what? It's been 16 years. The guy's doing great, and he still has his colon. He's getting married. So, to me, I think, it's all about helping the patients. It's all about jumping in. I never want to be told that I'm full of shit. I'd rather keep searching. But at the end, it's Indiana Jones. I'm going to Zimbabwe to give a conference and to talk about ivermectin, actually, in front of all the doctors over there. But also, I'm going to be collecting stools from Africa, from Zimbabwe.
Oh, wow.
So how amazing to compare the Californian population and New York and all the people I've tested in America to the African microbiome. So I'm going to be working with the government over there and trying to make it happen to see. But I think ultimately that's the future, to see. I already have connections with Malaysia. So Malaysia's on board. Taiwan's on board. So this is, to me, that's the future, because research is globalized. We have globalization of research with ICH GCP guidelines. Research should be all over. I have access to all these CROs, all these sites that can open up the world to the microbiome. And that's what I want to do. I want to do the 23andMe of the gut.
We appreciate you, and I
Thank
can't
you.
wait to see you just continue to. You're amazing.
Thank you.
So
And
thank
thank
you
you
for
for
making
your
time.
help. And thank you for your help guiding my patients with nutrition.
Oh, it's been
And-
great, and
Oh,
I'm so happy.
I saw this one patient in particular at my daughter's graduation, and she's like, "Oh my God, look at me! I'm all slim and slender, and I'm getting married, and I feel so great. Thank you for hooking me up with Robert." So, I told her, I said, "Yeah, I need to do the same and come to you." Because I've been dealing with COVID and all the stress, and I've killed my bifidobacteria a little bit. So I need to get back into shape and exercise. So together we'll
Yes,
do it.
we will
So
continue to help people.
perfect.
So thank you.
Thank you.